Welcome to the Women Living Well After 50 podcast. I'm Sulon Carrick and I'm passionate about inspiring, motivating, supporting and informing women over 50 to embrace this exciting time of life. Health and wellness in mind, body and spirit are the foundations for living well, but there is so much more to a life well lived. Each week, through conversations with my guests, I'll be presenting topics that will help us all to live well and enjoy life. So join me as we discover new ways to become women living well after 50. Are you ready to start living? What are you waiting for? Let's get started. Welcome to another episode of the Women Living Well After 50 podcast. I'm Sulon Carrick and it's lovely to have you join me. Financial freedom and financial independence. It's important to us, especially as we age, to be able to look after ourselves financially as we move through life. My guest today is Helen Baker. She's not your typical financial planner, though. Prior to qualifying as a finance advisor, Helen had a diverse professional background in the UK, Europe and Australia. She holds 2 master's degrees, one in financial planning and the other in management, innovation and change, as well as a Bachelor of Commerce in accounting. Helen is the founder of On Your Own 2 Feet and believes that women need to plan and not react. So let's go and join the conversation and find some advice on how we can manage our finances now and going into the future. Welcome, Helen. It's lovely to have you join me on the Women Living Well After 50 podcast.
Thank you for having me and hello to everybody.
Now, we're going to be talking about finances today. And I mean, at the moment, the way the cost of living is and everyone's really struggling. So it's a very timely interview, I think, especially for women who are leading up to retirement or they might have just retired, and, you know, what we should be doing to help us be financially independent and have that financial freedom to enjoy our life as we age.
Yeah, it is a big issue because if we look at the single people for cost of living, we said, you know, around about $43,000 was enough. That's now moved to about 51. And for couples, it's moved from like 55 to 73. So planning for retirement is definitely sort of been stretched out a bit further.
So before we get into your knowledge, because you are very experienced in this field, I'd like you to just share a little bit about your background with the listeners and also how you came to be an author and founder of On Your Own 2 Feet.
So financial advice kind of came about as my third career. So my original career was in accounting, so management accounting, not the shoebox sort out the tax one, thank goodness. And then some management overseas, some project management, which kind of sort of became a fixer role. And that's sort of what I came back to Australia to do, was sort of fixing businesses. And from that, sort of evolved into the financial advice space. So it's a different way to come in than a lot of people who've sort of always worked in the financial advice practices. And then just seemed to attract a lot of females who were looking for another female advisor to talk to, because certainly 15 years ago, there were not very many of us. And still we're a minority. Very much, I always say we don't have to queue for the toilets at conferences. It's the men who do. So, you know, we're still growing in the females represented here, but that's sort of where On Your Own 2 Feet was birthed, because I wanted something that talked to women, that was a brand that women could relate to. They felt safe, they felt secure, they felt like they could come in and ask any question without being intimidated, and most importantly, making decisions that get them and keep them on their own 2 feet.
Because, you know, generations before, it was always the men that looked after the finances, and they took over any finances that women had. And I remember, actually, I was doing some tax accounting myself, and I'd have some older people come in at tax time to do their returns, and their husband had died, and they wouldn't have any idea of what their situation was. And some of them, unfortunately, weren't as well off as what they thought they were. And they just, oh, but, he did it all the time. So fortunately, I think, from my generation, let's say, we've started where we have more of a say in finances, usually in partnerships. And I'm speaking generally here. Usually in relationships and partnerships, you sort of 50-50, you both have an input in, and you at least make yourself aware. But there's still a lot of women out there who, the husbands just control everything, or they just aren't sure where they're at. So I think that what you're doing is fabulous, because you are, giving women power over their finances.
Absolutely, because over the years as well, we've seen couples who have come in and the husband either thought he was doing a good thing and he's gone into something a little bit crazy, which has blown up a lot of their position, or been very cautious, not sought advice, and they've missed all these opportunities about strategies that they could have implemented, particularly as a couple, where you get to, move things around between each person. So yes, it has been a problem. And then we've seen a shift in that, where women have got a lot more involved in it. But now we're sort of seeing still that happens quite a bit, mainly because of this thing we now term sandwich generation, which is where the women again are looking after parents and grandparents as well as kids. And, you can only do so much. So they sometimes have let go of the finances again, which may or may not be the right thing for them.
And also, some women find themselves single after perhaps having been in a long-term relationship, and then years later they've split up, and they're not worth as much as what they thought they were, and they've got to start again with their planning. And as retirement comes to us, we don't want to be worrying about whether we've got enough money to live on. So I think that that's an important factor too.
Massively. It's a huge, huge issue. We see a lot of people who are in their 40s that separate, the kids have come along and then they feel like they've outgrown their partner. And then you see it again around retirement phase, where people are choosing, I want this life, and we just don't seem to be on the page anymore. It's an empty nest. And that changes as well. And obviously then the issue is, have the women been working? Have they been working full-time and in a career? How much time are they able to keep on working to build themselves up? Because you lose the economies of scale once you separate. And this is why we see about 40,000 women now in Australia living out of cars, which is horrific. So we need to stop that.
Well, yes, I was actually going to talk about that, because I saw you do an interview on that. And you were talking about that, and I had read something a few months ago, the same thing, that women in their 50s and 60s, are making up a greater proportion of homeless people now. And that's a shocking thing to happen. And also, women who have probably had a really good lifestyle, and now suddenly they're homeless and they don't know where to start. So let's talk about planning for retirement first, and then hopefully perhaps we can just also touch on, well, if I'm retired now, is it too late to do anything? So we'll talk about the planning for those of the listeners who are still working. They're probably in their 50s now, so they're getting towards the end of the working life, although we are all working longer now. But what are some of the things we need to be looking at, especially as a woman, in terms of our financial future?
Yeah, so I think what's great is around this 55 plus through, the focus can often be around superannuation and retirement. And the luxury that they have is they're able to take advantage of some strategies that young people don't have access to. So I talk about stretching your money further. So if we think about, if you throw your arms out wide and you imagine, this is what my income is, and then I've lost this through tax, and I didn't apply this strategy, and I'm spending this, so I'm just sort of wherever I am, maybe just making ends meet, or I do save some. But if you can push it back by saving some tax and allowing that tax to be part of your investment strategy and take advantage of other strategies that are there, you start to build and exaggerate the amount of money that you were investing than you would have been without that advice. So there's some great opportunities out there for women at this age to stretch that money further. And as you were saying, is it too late? To me, it's never too late. There's always things that you can do to put yourself in a better position. But obviously, lots of people say, oh, I wish I met you 5 years earlier or 10 years earlier. And I think, me too. But
Yeah.
there's still things that you can do to make it even better. Yeah.
I think the other thing is that we're probably not aware of the services like yourself that are available where we can go. Usually, as from your previous point about most financial planners and advisors are male, I think that stops women as well. So we need to be really flying the flag for women like yourself who are out there and can really advise women on what they need to be doing for many reasons, because I think they would feel more comfortable talking to you. As you said, they don't feel as intimidated. And being a woman yourself, you would understand what their life situation is. And I know that a lot of the time also people feel that with financial advice it's, oh, we'll just put it into super or whatever. So I think that one of the first steps would be to seek out someone like yourself sooner rather than later.
Yes, agree. I think one of the problems I think people think financial advice is that, it's someone sells an investment for commission. And we have issues now with lots of influencers and people out there looking like they're financial experts or financial advisors, and they're not licensed, and they're not actually giving these strategic advices as well. So for me, it's about strategy. Investment is a component, but it's secondary to getting the strategy right, because many people go and invest and trying to do the right thing, which is fabulous. They're trying to do the right thing, but they don't have foundations in place, what I call those 5 foundations. And then things go wrong and it all falls apart. And then they have to sell these investments. And that's what breaks into it. And nobody wants to sell something when they've worked really hard to build it. And Murphy's Law says when you have to sell it, it's usually worth less than what it was. So, these are all the kind of protections that we need to build in as women so that we feel safe and confident that, if this happens or that happens, this is my backup plan.
So if someone comes in to visit you, what are the sort of questions that you ask, or how do you start? If I came to you today and say, look, I need some advice on where I'm going.
Yeah, so usually what I find out is a little bit more about what the actual situation is, and then what is it that, I'm thinking about retiring, or I'd like to know when I could retire, or, would I have enough to live off this? Do I have enough? And this is a big thing that we're seeing now, where a lot of people have worked really hard to build up their position, but they are so scared that because no one knows how long we're going to be on the planet for, they're too reluctant to spend. And so they hold back, and then they get further down the track where they can go, oh, okay, I'm in a good position, I am okay, but then health has bitten them. And so they've lost opportunities to do travel or to do some of the fun things that they might have done earlier if they'd have known. So a lot of it is giving peace of mind. But I step through in the first meeting about the 5 foundations, and then talk about how does it sort of piece together? What are the things that they need to focus on? And then we can look at whether or not we want to move forward from there.
Mm, mm. And do you, can we just talk about a couple of the foundations of, you know, you say you've got 5 foundations. What do they sort of entail?
Yeah, so the first one is about having an emergency fund. And I think COVID highlighted that a lot of people just didn't have enough money in the bank for that rainy day that came along. And I used to talk about having 3 months in the bank sort of to cover expenses. So not your salary, but actually what your commitments are to debt repayments, to the groceries. And again, now we've got that cost of living. So that might be significant. During the COVID, for some people, it meant they really needed more like 6 months because of their profession. And now it's changed again because places are so desperate for people. People who couldn't get jobs previously are kind of giving options to pick them up now that they weren't there before. So it's always a moving target. And I talk about having your sleep at night factor. So having that amount in the bank is really important. And then the second one is what I call a spending and an investment plan. So I don't tend to use the word budget, because budget to me is like going on a diet and we stick to it for a bit and then we find, wow, this is really boring. And then we go out and just blow it all up, right? So, or it feels a little bit like handcuffs and restricted. So I think, put your spending
Yes.
plan in, getting your hair and makeup done if that's important to you, traveling if that's important to you. It needs to work out left over for the investment part. And then the question is, well, do you put that on the mortgage? Do you buy an investment property? Do you put it in super? Do you do a different investment? What do you do? And generally they'll be different at different times, depending on what the goals are and what the situation is, which is the private health cover, the general insurance, and then the personal ones. And some of those sit inside your super. 4 is around super, and there's a little bit of, mystery around that with, the fees, and it sounds like, oh, you can pay no fees anywhere. I mean, there are fees, but sometimes if you go for the cheapest of cheapest, you might not get access to the investments that you're looking for. So it all kind of needs to work together, as does the insurance that might be sitting in there and the nominations of who you've left your super to. And that's really important when we have children from previous relationships, or children and a new partner, or we're single, or however that all works. And then 5 is linked with that, which is estate planning. So the wills, the powers of attorney, and all of those. So if you're listening and you think, oh my goodness, I don't have all that sorted, well, you will not be alone, because no one has ever passed my 5 foundations test. There's always something that needs tweaking in there. So be encouraged. There's some things in there that you can do that can put you in a better position.
I think about the wills and estates, and it's something that we think that we're going to have all covered, but I actually have personal experience from a family situation, and I've got a friend going through it at the moment where wills have been contested and it gets very messy, and what you think might be your wishes are not necessarily carried out that way. So I think people need to have an understanding of that too, depending on how they're going to divide up their estate.
It's a really important factor, particularly these days as well, where we have so many relationship breakdowns. So whether it's your children or your grandchildren that you've left money to, and then, it's going out what we call L-shaped if it's, gone down to them, but then it's going out to the ex-partners. So there's some things around there that are really important. And it's also important to have this left hand and right hand working together. So when we were talking about insurances, where are they going? Are they going direct to somebody? Are they going to the will? The same with the super. Is it going direct to somebody, or is it going to the will? Because they're actually separate. So a lot of people think, oh, it's the same, but it's not. It's different, which has pros and cons to it. If it's left unmanaged, could be a problem, but it can be a great way to make sure that money goes where it needs to go. And for super, somewhat uncontested. So there's lots of fun things that we can do in here. I know people think finance is boring, but it's actually really fun.
Yeah, Well, I think the other thing too is I would think that once you start working with a client, it's not just a one-off. It's sort of a relationship that you have, and you regularly um, reviewing and implementing things. I also wanted to ask about the importance of perhaps having separate accounts as well as a joint account if you're in a relationship, because I just often wonder, especially if it's perhaps an abusive relationship or something like that, where, women need to have that little security pot of money in case something goes pear-shaped and they need to act. So do you sort of advise people on doing that as well?
Absolutely. I think that's absolutely key because, this is where we have what we call financial abuse, where we see, which is now a form of domestic violence as well, and restricting people's access to money or their ability to leave a relationship because they have no access to money or limited access to money or controlled in how they use that money, or even coercive control to take out loans in their name rather than the spouse's name and just load them up with debt so they can't leave. Like, there's a lot of horrible things, unfortunately, that are happening out there. So making sure that you've got access to your money is good. It's peace of mind. And you should also remain across your knowledge about what is happening with everything. So that's another value a financial advisor can bring, is that if you're meeting on a regular basis, all those things are transparently open. So if things are moving, if things are disappearing, it will get exposed. So you get less chance of losing the lot.
Mm, mm. Yes, and that can, I mean, it's a distressing, I suppose if you're in those situations where you're in a controlling relationship, you can't, it is more difficult for you to have your own account and things like that because, you just don't get that opportunity. I think it's a bit different for if you're just in a fairly stable relationship, but that would also help when, if the unfortunate happens and you separate, at least you still have something that you can be living on while things get sorted out. Because I've just had a friend who's gone through a separation after about 40 years. And I think we were talking before we came on about how these days, it's reality. We get to a certain point in life and perhaps we've been with someone for many years and then we've both gone, you know what, you might still care for that person or not, but you want different things in life and you agree to go your separate ways. Well, if there's property to be sold and things like that, it can't happen overnight. So I think the importance of having your own sort of control of your own money to some extent, as well as the joint finances, is very important.
Absolutely. And you should have your own super fund anyway, because generally it will make sense most of the time that you have a super fund as well. So that's another asset that you have access to. You have your own login. You can see what's happening with those investments. So it's another area that you can have visibility, even if some of the other things are hidden. But ideally, we want to be able to get people to get these things exposed and understand that not being able to see everything that's going on and restricting you is actually a form of financial abuse.
Mm, mm. And what about in this situation now where everyone's struggling? I mean, most people are starting to feel a bit of a pinch now, depending, especially in the lower socioeconomic area, but even middle class and some upper middle class now are really starting to feel the pinch with the way the cost of living's going. What can we do? What are some things we can do to sort of protect our money and protect our lifestyle? Do we have to give up all the things that we like?
I'd like to think not.
Yeah.
I think we need to certainly be putting some pressure on institutions to stop being so greedy out there. When you look at the returns and the profits that some of these organisations are making at the expense of everyday Australians, I mean, it's really not okay. Obviously, from a practical perspective, once they've hedged up prices, they're unlikely to ever knock them right back down to where they were or even close to it. So I think we have to revisit everything. I think you have to almost, even though we don't like the diet one, we have to go, okay, let me track through where am I spending, where is my money going, and have an understanding about that. And then make changes about what do you keep, what do you cancel, what do you modify in order to cut some of the things out, perhaps where there's unnecessary spend. So we talk about lifestyle creep, and we've had it good for a while, and certainly in the COVID year where there was so much money being thrown around, once we've got used to spending in a particular way, it's very difficult for people to come back, but it is something that we have to adapt to. On the plus side, because of this kind of greed and the excessive profits that have been out there for a lot of organisations, there has been a significant increase in investments as well. So super should have gone up significantly over the last year. Other investments that you have, if it's property or other investments, they should have risen as well. So it's about being what's appropriate for you to go, okay, do I take some of this off the table and protect it? Do I downsize? What do I do, or do I hang on? And everybody's situation will be different. And that's where the plan comes into play, and that's where the strategy comes into play about this is what my particular situation looks like. What would be best for me in my situation to help me achieve my success and sleep at night at the same time.
I was thinking as you were talking then, there's a lot of us that probably have direct debits or subscriptions or things like that we don't even think about and perhaps not even use. There's people that might have a gym membership and they start off going all the time and then they don't go, but the payment is still coming out, but they don't do anything about that. I would think that we have to take some responsibility ourselves to perhaps do a little mini audit on where our money is actually going.
And it's the sneaky one. The other one that often happens, because a lot of women that will be listening will be the mums, and by nature they have very big hearts and will sacrifice their own position for their own children. And that's not good. And in some ways, I've seen some actually abusive situations from that perspective where the mum actually becomes an enabler. So, they're racking up credit card debts or they're not modifying their position, and yet they earn more money than mum does. And then mum is helping them out to her own detriment. And once that money's gone, it's gone. At what point does that stop? So it's hard to say no, but you're actually helping your children to make good decisions about money if you do put a line in the sand and just say, sorry, I really got to help myself. You might get something down the track when I've gone up to the sky, but for now, I can't do it,
I think it would also be the situation too now because with housing the way it is. And I mean, Brisbane's just become the second most expensive housing in Australia, which is a bit of a shock. But a lot of kids aren't leaving home, or they're going back to live in the family home. So, I'm sure there'd be a lot out there, as you say, mums in particular, well, you want the best for your children or you want to look after them, but I'm sure there'd be a lot that'd be saying, oh, well, don't worry about paying rent, or don't worry about the food or things like that. And whilst you want to help them, you're not really helping them to stand on their own 2 feet, even if you just have a nominal amount that they have to contribute to the financial pot.
Yeah, the term we call boomerang kids. So they went and then they came back. So yeah, I think it is a danger because a lot of people might look at it at rent or board and say, oh, okay, you know, just pay $100 a week, for example. But for some people, that's all these people are paying, or maybe a little bit more. But when you add up the internet, the food, the electricity, the water, the gas, all of these things, it's significant, and small amounts per week are not going to cover it. And vice versa, if you go, okay, well, if you had to rent, you would have to pay, let's say, at least $500 a week somewhere else. So even if they were paying $300 a week, they are still doing better
Very well.
than, yeah. So I think it's nice to care for your kids, and it's nice to have time with your kids. A lot of women, you know, they are coming off the back end of either a relationship breakdown, or they haven't worked for a long time and they have the superannuation gap, got the retirement gap. And quite honestly, a lot of the kids today are earning way more than what the parents had ever earned. They're really earning good money. And finance isn't often talked about. So they might think, oh, well, mum's offering this or that. Well, mum must be in a good position then, because no one really wants to say where they're at. And some people might think, well, yeah, if she's saying that, I must be able to do it, and then just doing it oblivious. So, and a lot of kids as well who haven't even left home yet will probably not be aware about what the real costs are to go and live somewhere and buy your own fridge and pay your internet and pay the food and electricity, and understand what the costs really are as well. So I think being transparent about that. I know one of my friends did it with her kids and just laid it all out on the table and made decisions that actually we would rather sacrifice these kind of, you know, the subscriptions, the Netflixy, some of those, having too many of those, in exchange for they went out for a bite to eat once a week or something like that. You know, it was modified because they were the things that they valued, rather than these other things, which they're really home for anyway, because they're quite sporty family. So,
All
yeah.
right, yeah. And I think that's the other thing. It doesn't matter whether you're a family, single, or a couple. You know, you have the things like Netflix, and there's so many of those subscription TV or whatever it is out there, and they might only be. I actually we don't have them, but I'm
Yeah.
assuming they might not cost very much. So you go, oh, well, that's okay. That's only $5 there, or $10 a month. And then they get another one and another one. And then, you know, it could end up being a couple of $100 a month or more. And you don't realize you're just looking at that little value for each one. So there's all these hidden things that we need to, as I said, do our own audit in between coming to see you.
Yes, and insurance is another one, because insurance has gone up around 25 to 35%. So my general insurance broker who looked at mine actually increased the amount of cover that I needed because of the cost of replacing houses now, but increased the excess, because if it was a really serious thing, then, you know, you wouldn't miss the extra that you had to pay for the excess. For my general insurance broker, he actually looked at my situation and increased the amount that I was covered for, but to make then paying whatever excess it would be. If it was more, you probably wouldn't notice it because it's a really big expense to replace a house. Whereas having smaller excesses, but you often don't claim for those items if it's small things, or you don't know that you can, or it's not covered. So, you know, these being wise around what's appropriate levels of cover and appropriate premiums to pay, rather than just going, you know what, that's gone up 25%, I'm just going to cancel it. Obviously, with subscriptions, you can really only watch one at a time. So do you need them all, and do you binge on one for a month or two on a series and then cancel that one and start on something else? You know, we don't have to be inundated with a lot of these things that aren't financially sensible to have, and they do add up. It's quite frightening how much they do all cost when you add them all together.
Yes, and as you say, the insurances are going up. My husband, that's his thing. He likes to look at that, and ours have really, even just for car insurance and life insurance, that sort of thing. And I think unless some people, especially if it's just direct debited each month, you'll get advised on annually, oh, well, this is what it's going to be. But a lot of people don't even look at that. They might just go, oh, yeah, that's okay. Especially if it's house and contents or something like that. They'll go, oh, yeah, they've upped the value to whatever. But you might not have that much in content. So I think we need to educate ourselves to be more aware of all these other things and not just brush them aside. And if we feel that we don't know how to do something, we need to go to professionals to be able to help us with that.
I think that's right. And I think certainly for the luxury of mine is most of the time, well, pretty much all the time, that the advice is paid for itself by doing something you didn't realize you could do, preventing a mistake, peace of mind that's harder to value, but you're generally making good decisions and making good quality strategic and investment decisions that accelerate what your position is going forward. And that's why I actually love what I do, because you can actually see the benefit of putting somebody in a better position long term, that it's just so exciting to know that they'll actually be okay. They'll be really great, actually, for a lot of them. It's really nice. I know clients, a couple of clients who've been with me for a very long time. Their friend had a really bad experience, twice actually, and for years and years wouldn't come, even though they kept saying, you need to go and see Helen, you need to see Helen. And came in, they're in a great position. And so they could have probably just got through. But what we've been able to do for them has accelerated their position even further. That, the other day, because markets went up, they rang and said, actually, can we just go and buy another car now? Sure. They don't have to worry. So it's really great to be able to do that for people. And again, we don't know what we don't know. There are some things that have been said about the industry, but the majority of people who are advising really, really care about their clients and are very smart people who can help you.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I think it's as I said, it's great that you can also deal with women as well. You've written a couple of books that I just wanted to touch on before we close. So one was the original, was it, On Your Own 2 Feet, and then you've done one based around divorce. Is that correct? Have I got
That's
that
right. So
yes.
So the first one is it's about the foundations, and then I talk about different life events, good or bad things that might happen and what to do in those situations. Because, like we said, with sandwich generation, we've got to look after parents or grandparents. So there's things in there about aged care. There's about managing inheritance. There's going back to work if people have to start going back to work. There's a string of different things of life in there. You want to start your own business. So that one's really great to talk about different ages and stages of life. And then the other one, which is specifically on divorce, was created because so many people were coming in after they had signed on the dotted line and made mistakes that cost them significant money. So what I wanted to do is educate people about what I call the pre-settlement phase. So before you sign on the dotted line, understand all of these bits and pieces, then go in armed and dangerous enough to go, I'm not going to be, taken for a ride here. I know what I'm entitled to. I know what I need to do, and protect yourself. And the good thing is, you can open these books at all different times, because depending on what's going on in your world, it's going to be relevant to something. Yeah.
Yes, and it would also be relevant to other people in your life as well, that they can read and trying to teach the next generations and so forth, so they probably don't make the same mistakes as what we did, or they're able to do things earlier than what we did, and so hopefully they will be in a better position. But the other thing I was thinking of when you were just talking then was about something we had. We had a bit of a windfall, or it was a bit of an inheritance, but and it was just sitting in some of it was just sitting in our everyday account, and you get no sort of negligible interest on that. And at the moment, unfortunately, the interest rates are high for mortgages, but investments, the interest rates are high. So I just said to my husband, why don't we just transfer that into a different account? But we just sat down one day and said, look, this is our current situation. Are we making the best of what we've got? And even that small little thing, I mean, really, we should probably come and talk to you, but even just taking it out of that account where it wasn't doing anything and just sitting there, and putting it into somewhere where it was getting a bit of a return, really didn't take long to do. And it was something that I'm so happy that we did that, because we're getting the benefit of it. So we're coming towards the end of our conversation today, and it's really a valuable one. I was talking to a friend before we came on, and I said that I was going to be interviewing you, and she said, oh great, I can't wait to hear that one, because that is something that many women really need to know about their finances. But is there any other tips that people could start with today? What would be one thing that someone could start with today to feel as if they're taking back control of their financial situation?
Well, I'd actually encourage them to actually just go and see a financial advisor, because the first appointment for almost every advisor is free. So it allows you to just hear back about where some areas may need some tweaking, whereas other things could be major opportunities or issues. And if you know that now, you can take action. And then from there, multiply that out year on year on year on year of getting you in a better position and a better position. You'll benefit from that. And if advisors can't help you, they will say, actually, it's pretty good. You don't need to do anything. So you really don't have much to lose. Obviously, go with your gut. Always the wonderful thing I think about us women is we have that intuition, women's intuition that goes, run. If you get that run, you don't even need to understand why you need to run, just run. But for anywhere that you feel safe and you feel somebody really cares about you and has your heart and really wants the best for you, I would go and visit them, have a chat, and just see what they've got to say, hopefully by implementing things that are appropriate for you.
And do you have to, can you just be an average person to go to a financial advisor? You might not have a big nest egg or anything, but is it worthwhile for just anyone to go and have a chat?
This is one of the issues that we've had since the Royal Commission. Whilst that was good and probably warranted and cleaning up some of the industry, it has made a lot of costs a lot higher than they used to be. So people that, 15, 10 years ago that we used to be able to help, that's now a lot more difficult. But you still could get a first appointment with someone, and there are connections that, whether it's me or whether it's someone else that we can connect you to. And then there is the book that you can have a read of. There's articles that I put out regularly. There's these podcasts. There's things that you can listen to that will hopefully help you, educate you, and make you feel confident about doing some things that are appropriate for your situation. So I think there's always something that you can do. And yeah, if you can get an appointment, great. If you can't, study the book, study other things that are around from the right people who are advising you, that are licensed to say what they're allowed to say.
I think one of the most important things is be aware of your situation and not sort of put your head in the sand, but try and work out. But the other thing is that we can all do something. It's just a matter of whether it's just saying, well, I'm not going, I've got to work out my priorities. And unfortunately, I can't go and do that this week, but that's just life. You have to prioritize and just be a bit more responsible and take a bit more of the responsibility of where your money goes.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think understanding where things are, and again, if somebody's, whether they buy the book or not, and I say the book only because the money goes to charity. So I'm not saying it so, I can go and buy a Porsche or something. But, if you Google some articles, you will find bits and pieces where I talk about, and then go into your situation, have a look at those foundations, start to investigate what you've got, where the gaps might be, if you can, or again, jumping onto some of the workshops that some people run, things just to move forward. The fact that you're even listening to this, I think is, inside there's something that you can do to put yourself in a better position. And I 100% agree with you. Don't put your head in the sand, because another year will go by, another 2 years or 3 years. And if you can, even from where you're at right now, make it something better and improve your position. If you did that now rather than 3 years from now, you've got the benefit of time accumulating on top of all of these things, and taking advantage of strategies. So highly encourage you to do that.
I'll also be putting your website links and your links to your books as well, because I did look on your website and you've done quite a few interviews on television and radio, and you're a speaker at events. So there's a lot of information even on your website that is, of value. So, for people that perhaps can't afford to go to a financial advisor, you've got lots of information. You've got your book, and what we've talked about today will hopefully give someone a bit of a start. So before we go today, Helen, it's been lovely chatting with you, and I'm actually going off to look at our spreadsheet again after this to make sure that we're going okay. It's always a good reminder, because things, you just go along, and then a year or 6 months down the track. So I sort of try every 3 months or 3 to 6 months, just see where are we at, what have we been doing, and where can we sort of improve, or hey, we're going okay. That doesn't mean you can lash out either, I suppose, because we don't know how long we're going to live. But anyway, before we go, I ask my guests the same question. So my question to you is, what does being a woman living well mean to you?
Probably happiness, I think, because women are wired for security, and we get a little bit frazzled if we're not feeling financially secure. So I think it just, whilst money doesn't buy you happiness, I think it just gives you that security enough to go out and live your best life and not have to be in fear all the time. I think we're only on this planet for such a amount of time. And the other reason, I guess, is because I think whilst there's always more we can do for ourselves, there are people way worse off than us. And I think it's a great opportunity. If we can get ourselves ahead, then we could help somebody, even with a little bit, that makes a big difference to their life. Yeah. And leaving the planet knowing you helped someone else would be amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, totally agree with that. So that's a lovely way to finish our interview. So thank you, Helen Baker, for joining me today. And it's been lovely to have you to chat about our finances and what we should be doing to have a good lifestyle now and into the future.
Amen. Thank you for having me. It's been great. Thank you.
Well, that was a very interesting conversation that I had with Helen Baker, financial advisor, author and founder of On Your Own 2 Feet. We really do need to take responsibility to a certain degree for our finances, but if we aren't sure, we do need to reach out to someone who can give us some advice so that we can make decisions to give us a more secure financial future and for financial freedom. So I don't know about you, but I'm going to be going and having a look at where our little, where we could be saving a little bit of money out of our monthly spend. But until next time, that's it for this episode. So I'd love you to share it with a friend who would definitely benefit from Helen's advice. And until next time, remember to live well, enjoy life, and most of all, be a woman living life your way. Bye for now.